impulse when Pentheus has been killed by his mother and the Furies, and they pull the tree back, and they tie him to the tree and fling him into the air, and he flies through space, and he's killed, and they rip him to shreds, and I guess cut off his head. My impulse was that the thing to do was to get a head from the New Haven morgue and pass it around the audience.
Welcome back to Life Lessons in Film.
Hello.
Today we're going to be making sense of, more sense. We're going to making even more sense of life through My Dinner with Andre.
Yeah.
This is part 2, because honestly there was just so much stuff.
So much juice.
So much juice. Didn't even finish watching the movie the first time, so we thought, why don't we break it up into 2 chunks? See part 1 for the synopsis. Yeah. So there's a whole bunch, of course, of more stuff in the second part. And there were just also things that we didn't touch on in the first part. I even just in the beginning, it already starts off with a lot of interesting thoughts and conversations with Wally first making his way to the restaurant to meet Andre. And he talks about when he was a kid, things were so much simpler. He was an aristocrat in a way where he was just getting to just listen to music and discuss art and enjoy things and lay about and have fun all day. And then now all he thinks about is money.
Yeah. When he was a kid, he had all the money.
Yeah. He could take taxis being driven around.
Exactly. But all he ever did was think about art and music and just revel in that.
Yeah.
But then now that he's an adult, all he thinks about is money. Yeah. He's an artist, but all he thinks about is money. Yeah.
I grew up on the Upper East Side. And when I was 10 years old, I was rich. I was an aristocrat, riding around in taxis, surrounded by comfort, and all I thought about was art and music. Now I'm 36, and all I think about is money.
Another one that I think they touch on around the halfway point of the movie is Wally, when he starts opening up. He talks about how in the circles he finds himself around, intellectual academic types, it's amazing that he, at one point when he was teaching Latin, he was a Latin teacher, he even found himself feeling totally dismissed once people found out what he did, and how people are still so focused in on career and what you do, the status and the prestige element of what makes you a person, and completely ignores everything else. So he says, we'd even be having conversations and the people were enjoying their conversations. Mm-hmm. I was holding up my end of the conversation.
And they were completely enraptured by him.
They're having a good time. And he's like, what I was saying.
But the moment,
Then he's like, within 5 minutes or so it doesn't even take long, people then have to say, first I guess a lot of people feel like, okay, I like this person. Now I have to find out whether I should continue liking this person. It'll determine what they do, lets me determine whether I should continue this conversation. First I test it. Okay, this person, I at least get along with them, then we got to find out what they do for work. Right. Yeah. And then when he tells them he's a Latin teacher, he's like, it says it's a portcullis just slams, their face just changes immediately and they walk away, even if they were enjoying themselves.
There was no question of my being able to participate on an equal basis in the conversation with people. I mean, I'd occasionally have conversations with people, but then when they asked what I did, which would always happen after about 5 minutes, their faces, I mean, even if they were enjoying the conversation or they were flirting with me or whatever it was, their faces would just have that expression, just like the portcullis crashing down, those medieval gates. They would just walk away. I mean, I literally lived like a dog.
And so what he was saying, that every single thing before that was completely and utterly negated. Mm-hmm. Everything that seemed to matter so much that made these two, people that he was interacting with, really so incredibly drawn to him, to the point of some of them looked at him, he says, as though they fell in love with me, mm-hmm. basically. But the moment then the question of what do you do for a living comes up and he says, I'm a Latin teacher, all of a sudden you are at an absolute nothing. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's just, I think it just kind of carries the theme of the movie along, where people are looking at the superficial things instead of the things that really matter at the end of the day. A huge theme of the movies that they talk about people not really seeing themselves and having certain masks on. And so you have a certain mask on because you think that I have to present myself in a certain way, because as far as you're concerned, in the world, you matter if you do certain things or if you live a certain kind of way. And then, of course, if you have a certain kind of job. That's how then people interact with each other. What he talks about, right? He talks about the world that we live in, where he says theater ideally should show life realistically. Mm-hmm. It should basically, art should depict life. Yeah. And then they have this whole discussion about, well, should it? Because life is brutal. And so do you really want for people to go to the theater and be reminded of how brutal life is? I mean, every single day they're faced with it. With the news, they live their own lives. There's so much brutality in their own individual lives. So should theater really do that even more? How does that really serve people? Because then people are just leave lamenting even more than...
Yeah, just feel even more paralyzed. And
how does it affect an audience to put on one of these plays in which you show that people are totally isolated now and they can't reach each other and their lives are desperate? Or how does it affect them to see a play that shows that our world is full of nothing but shocking sexual events and terror and violence? Does that help to wake up a sleeping audience? See, I don't think so. Because I think it's very likely that the picture of the world that you're showing them in a play like that is exactly the picture of the world they have already.
Which I like that conversation because it makes sense that a medium, art, entertainment medium like theater would be in the same kind of position as any other, where people discuss, I think, the same thing with books and movies, for instance, where they say like, oh, movies nowadays are all about fluff and just total distraction, and there's nothing real about trying to wake people up from issues or things that they need to face about themselves or the world. I think people have those discussions about movies all the time, but it's interesting to see two people who work in theater have the same thing where they say, theater used to mean something, and now it seems like people that used to appreciate good theater will just accept mediocre, lazy, or just totally pointless plays being put on and just kind of accept, yeah, it was okay, just accept that that's what the theater is now, is it's just like fluff. Again, pulp. But then, they go back and forth between, well, maybe that's why people like that now. Maybe that's what the theater's become, is because people need that distraction from the constant bombardment of the harsh realities of their life and the world. And that gives them a little bit of an escape, which allows them to actually deal with their own issues or their own, struggles. Whereas if you were always bombarded, and then on the times that you do have room in your day to actually go see some entertainment or go see some performances, and it's still the same thing, maybe that would actually be worse. But that's what they debate, but they don't really come to a conclusion because no one comes to a conclusion on that.
Which is great. That's where the relevance of art comes in, for people to kind of be forced to grapple, or to be given, not even forced, to be given the opportunity to grapple with themselves, right? Because a lot of their conversation as well is the fact that people don't want to talk about reality, and they avoid it in so many different ways. And then there's that concern that Wally has, where he's like, well, yeah, then you're saying that I have to leave New York and go to Mount Everest or go to like Tibet or something to actually exist, to be and to know myself. And I can't do that here. And, I'm quite happy with my life here. I'm happy to make coffee in the morning, and maybe sometimes I like to leave it overnight for whatever reason. And I get super excited that there's a cockroach in the coffee. I don't find a cockroach in the coffee. And of course, if I find a cockroach, then I'm really sad, and he's like, these little things give me so much pleasure. These are things that I look forward to. But you're telling me that in order for my life to feel like it matters, in order for me to be able to actually be living, I have to go to Tibet.
What I love about the movie is I think I basically agree with both of them.
Me too.
Through the entire movie. A lot of it they agree. It's such a good conversation. Two people that are very, very open-minded and respectful and intelligent can have that kind of conversation where they both start to get very open, and at times they will agree and other times they won't, and they're both very understanding at the times. In fact, they probably are happy at times when the other person disagrees, because that gives a bit more of a need to rethink their own position, But it's really just like a good example of how to properly have a good conversation with another person. They're talking about, well, so many people, the experiences are simulated. They might watch someone in a documentary climb Mount Everest or go skydiving or something, or go through all these things with virtual reality, but it's not the same thing. That they're still just living in this simulated, kind of sanitized, lobotomized existence. You got to actually go out and really do something that's outside of what this modern comfort society normally gives us. And I agree with both of them, because I think you do have to have adventures like that to at times really just shake your general ordinary routine. Because he's like, we live in such habitual lives that then that's where you just shut down emotionally, or just kind of like you just become so robotic. But then Wally's talking about, but what's really the difference, if we think about it, between going to Mount Everest and trying to live in the moment versus, exploring a cigar shop down the road in New York, it's the same thing, really. It's all the same matter. It's all the same, like, physical existence, right? So you could probably, and I agree with both, because first of all, I think there are different kinds of people that someone can really actually go into a cigar store and get so much meaning out of it from just maybe looking at how the people that are there look, and maybe see the different how they interact, and it might wake up something on how they want to change their life. Maybe the cigar store owner is just living in a way that just inspires you when you walk in. So you might be able to get so much out of going to that cigar store. And then there could be someone that goes to Mount Everest, they take a couple selfies, they want to post it on social media, get a bunch of dopamine hits. but that's all it means to them. Exactly. They don't really. So yeah, I think it's more of an individual thing.
I feel like it depends how an experience affects you. Depends on you as a person, because Wally talks about, so what are you going to do? Are you going to take the whole of America to Mount Everest then to kind of like snap them out of the dream world? For Andre, that was something that was very important, but like you're saying, someone else could have gone there and it wouldn't have been as significant to them. Who knows, like for some people, you don't really have to do anything drastic to actually enjoy the fruits of life. Yep. You know what I mean? Yep. And I think that's also, there's something to be said for people who can find meaningful experiences or anything in an experience or moment that isn't really deemed to be so extremely exciting. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's so much down to the individual there. There are people that can live in the same small town that they grew up in and live very meaningful, joyous lives, gather a lot of wisdom, and be really good at people around them. And then there are people that live in a small town their whole lives and are very negative, toxic, closed-minded, ignorant people, and then the opposite with like traveling your entire life and never setting down any roots or anything. Though that can make people be very open-minded because they just see how so many variations of how people live and how things are, so they realize that there is no one set way to do things. So they're very open-minded and they're always wanting to learn and grow and question things. Yeah. Then there are people that travel their whole lives and again, just don't actually let any of it change them or they don't reflect on any of it.
I mean, the thing with Andre too, he talks about how he was completely...
A little bit of tinnitus. Go ahead.
Yeah, like he talked about how he was very blind to himself for a very, very long time. And this adventure that he embarked on was the thing that basically kind of like pulled him out of that space that he was in before. When they talk about how people look at each other as a source of grounding, you have a mom, you have a dad, you have a sister or a son or whatever. All of us rely on these things as entities that ground us, and that I think that we're talking about aloneness, for example. At the end of the day, you as a human being are very, very alone. And that really, I remember this was towards the end and it got me all like emotional because I can really relate to that. I used to have this huge fear. And I think I still do. I do still have this fear of being alone. And a lot of my dissatisfaction with relationships across the board, family, friends, everything, was just this constant state of aloneness that really concerned me because I felt like living life, community is so important, and community means knowing that you have a support system for anything in terms of whatever challenges you're facing, even when you're or joys that you have, to share them with someone. And if you don't have that, what is life? What are you even living? What they're talking about, being just okay with being as a person. And I think that the thing I like about that the most is that being just okay with being yourself, how you are, where you are, your flaws and all, everybody else is like a cherry on top, the people in your lives. Yes. They aren't this desperation, you know what I mean, for connection that you have. At the end of the day, when you are okay with yourself, everybody else, like the relationship, you can truly then have a healthy relationship with people. Once you get to the point of, I'm okay as I am, I think that's when all those relationships become like even much, much more healthy.
Yep. I agree. I think that also helps you because at one point, and I like that this movie just resonates with me in so many things where they talk about when they bring up self-help books at one point, again, like that you could expect that those are the kind of people that would just, be like, well, that's just cheap, easy to digest versions of actual philosophy. I mean, they're very well versed in it. They mentioned Schopenhauer and Heidegger and stuff at one point. So you could think that these two guys that are very well educated and everything wouldn't have any use for just kind of dollar store kind of, get your life together kind of thing. But they were actually, in a way, kind of totally understood the importance of them and why there's such a big market, because everyone is so desperate to understand themselves and other people and just have no idea where to start and have no idea what's going on, I also like that Andre said for 18 years he'd been just like a robot, which is really, I think, very honest thing to admit, because that's a hard thing for people to admit, even just for like a year, let alone 18 years.
And the fact that he didn't know his wife, he realized.
Yeah, he didn't know that. There's a great part, one of my favorite parts in the movie, where he's looking at this picture of his wife, Chiquita, and he said, she was in her like 26 at the time, and he'd look at it all the time, he'd keep it with him. And then it was only after like 18 years that he looks at this picture, really looks at it. And before, he'd always just look at, wasn't she so sexy on that beach that day, wearing what she was wearing? And he looks at it now, and he looks like, this is the saddest person in the world. Yeah. It's like, I never really looked at it, which I thought was a very, because I've seen this, I think this is the third time I've seen this movie now, but this is the first time with that part especially. I feel like every time I watch this movie, I feel like I get more out of it. It's one of those movies. And yeah, like I've been recently going back and looking at old photos of people I knew or things in my life, and look at them totally differently. Seeing the sadness more versus just, oh yeah, remembering that day in general or what I felt at the time, than really looking at myself or the people in the picture.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's like a whole other, I guess to do that, you do have to totally be in a different, you have to be completely, first of all, where he's at, where he's raw and open and questioning everything. He says, when you get to the point where after realizing that you've been a robot, then you just, you actually start to think, who am I? What do I want out of life? Who do I actually want to spend my time with?
Mm-hmm.
These are things a lot of people, at some point it hits you. You really start to critically think about, like, who do I actually want to be around, spend my time with? What do I want to do? What gives me joy? What's important to me?
They bring up modern Western societies, right?
Yeah.
And how all of us are actually, we don't realize that we're prisoners in a system that we're actually contributing to in different ways. And part of unpacking that is, like the idea of Western society, there is a lot of push for being productive, even when you're taking a break, you have to be productive in terms of what hobbies do you have. And so when people ask you, when you meet someone, your friend, your family, what have you been up to? When you have this sense of, well, I went to the park or I started running and it's been really nice and I'm training, or I went, I did ABC. And if you don't have these things, a collection of productivity to put on the table, then you are wasting your life. It's hard to just say nothing. I have just been existing. This thing where every time someone asks me, I have this feeling of pressure to think about like stuff that you will approve of. That has been in the past something that feels I feel like a failure to say that I enjoyed just doing nothing. When you step out of your comfort zone, the comfort of your own environment, then you have to kind of like, okay, I'm going to put on the mask and play my role. Let me, write down things. What could I have said I did? Let's say, for example, I didn't do anything all day and we just kind of like lay down. I could say, well, I was reflecting on so you kind of like, you know what I mean? Yeah. You maneuver what you did. You present it in a certain, you package it in a way that modern Western society will like digest. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because they won't digest you just reflecting on nothing, on yourself. Were you reading a book? Yeah. Is that the thing you're reflecting on? The philosophy of someone? Exactly. You know what I mean? You better have, that at least should have been the thing you're reflecting on. Yeah. It's such a productivity obsessed world that you don't even think about exactly. Like you think, oh, but what about all the people that are realizing that, trying to live a more minimalistic, sustainable, and they realize that overproductivity and is bad for mental health and happiness and all that kind of stuff. And you're like, sure. But even with those, I think a lot of those people that want to, kind of give themselves more time to just do the things they want to do, there still is exactly that pressure of, even when you're talking with friends on your free time and they ask, what did you do for fun? You still feel that need to basically be productive in a different way. It's like, okay, well, we got this done. We really needed to do that. But then we also had fun doing this. And then we traveled here. And then we, you can't just say, we laid down and we meditated. Because even if you meditate, what came about from your meditating? Yeah. Did it help you work out an issue from your childhood? Did it, help? But not even that. Yeah. Because honestly, the working issue from your childhood, who in your life has said that? Yeah. Because honestly, whenever I say things like working things out, meditating on whatever, I swear to God, I will bring up someone. I'll have to find a philosopher at that time. Yeah. Because only if I rope some sociologist or philosopher will you take my doing nothing to be productive. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Totally. All the time. Yeah. You have to justify it with that, where it's like you can't just have wanted to think about these things yourself. It has to be, also given, support by someone who has a title or is famous or has done things, I was thinking even with the like lying down, like we just had a nice lazy Sunday and we just relaxed in the bed, did nothing. And then you still, I think, have to justify it. Like you still have to value it with, and it was great. We needed it. Yeah. You still have to, because then it still feels like productive, like you were resting because you had such a hard week, so you gained your energy back. Exactly. You have to still say, and I needed it. And then people would be like, totally get it. Oh, you needed it. Well, that's why you did it. But instead of just saying, no, we lied down. Did you need it? Yeah.
Doesn't really matter. I don't know. We just lied down and spent the whole day in bed. And they'd be like, oh, well, that's it? And there was no real reason?
Exactly.
So then they don't approve of it anymore.
Yeah. The way that we're living right now is like your life has to come with footnotes. It has to come with footnotes, references.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Otherwise, you're not living.
Yeah.
It cannot be validated. Is it an accredited source?
Yes,
this life of yours that you're living.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane.
It's crazy. Also, I'd say going back to Wally talking about how certain circles have an acceptable career or hobbies or value systems, that are accepted. And if you don't quite fit in it, then they, he said, I was treated like a dog for a long time because I was a Latin teacher, which then if he went to another group of people, he would be excluded because he'd seem too snobby or snooty or unattainably, smart or whatever. You teach Latin, a dead language, something that only like priests speak in, Okay, wow. Like, and then people would be intimidated, or they'd just think like, okay, well, you're too fancy, or like, get out of here. You don't understand what it's like to really have to do work or something, That's kind of a pointless. Teaching people a language that no one uses anymore, what's even the point? That's such a useless profession, right?
You're privileged.
You're too privileged, and that's such a waste of time. So people would kind of treat him like a dog in another way, right?
Yeah.
And so on one hand, I think that's a real issue that all humans fall into, where they can get into these in-groups when Andre is talking about these outposts of people that believe that the world is so robotic and drone-like now that they have to create these pockets of communities that are about reawakening the human being and its true essence and reconnecting with emotions and trying to, like, proper living.
They're feeling that there'll be these pockets of light springing up in different parts of the world, and that these will be, in a way, invisible planets on this planet. And that as we, or the world, grow colder, we can take invisible space journeys to these different planets, refuel for what it is we need to do on the planet itself, and come back. And it's their feeling that there have to be centers now where people can come and reconstruct a new future for the world.
Which is, you're like, I see the value in that, but then also, like he says, it can also then turn into this elitist in-group kind of fascistic thinking again, where we're the ones that get it, no one else
gets it. So then you're just operating in silos, which is exactly the opposite of what you're trying to accomplish.
Humans have it really happens very easily, and then cults and all kinds of stuff. But yeah, so I think on one hand, it's frustrating when it seems like, but then you understand when you get older why it's so hard to, for instance, with movements or getting anything done or changed, because everyone has their silos. And so it's hard to break into any one particular silo and try to communicate and get people to, want to help you or like you or give you their time. On the other hand, I also understand why it happens, because if I look at myself, honestly, especially if you find not only why humans, I think, do some naturally kind of, there's so many groups, specific subfactions of anything, is because it becomes harder when you start to experience life or you live a life that's very different from other people. You can still get along, but is it as enjoyable? And humans, you do want to feel like you enjoy the time you're with other people. Otherwise, you might as well just be alone.
Especially the older you get.
The older you get, because you become more and more specific in your experiences and the things you do. So not only is it like, okay, you live in this particular area, then you have a certain job, or then you go to a specific school that's just hard to relate to people that went to a different school, right? And so as much as tribalism is bad, and you wish that people could kind of transcend that, even I think more people that are aware of needing to transcend that still find themselves in their own tribes of people that know that you need to transcend tribalism. So it's hard to, because the more I think emotionally intelligent you get, or more self-aware, or more you learn about your, anything, basically, it makes it harder to be around people that aren't as interested or aren't as knowledgeable about a certain thing or a skill. If you get better and better at a certain instrument, you find it less enjoyable to be around people of a lesser caliber of that skill. Or knowledge about anything. So I find myself with that, where as much as I believe that it's important to communicate with everyone and see everyone's humanity and to respect everyone the same, it's still hard to be around people that you feel like, I don't even know where to begin to explain this to you. So then you just don't bother. Yeah.
And it's not to even say that... And it's not even to say that when you feel like that, you are right and the person is in the wrong, because the person may feel the same way about you.
Which I totally understand.
Yeah,
they would.
Exactly.
Still, I think, obviously, again, there's still much more we didn't cover, but we tried with 2 videos. that was some stuff that that was some other stuff, some more stuff that we noticed and thought about my dinner with Andre. But if you guys saw it, what else did you notice from it?
Yeah.
Please share.
Yeah, please share. Who did watch it? We're so curious to know.
Yeah. This movie should be showed in schools during a sub day when the substitute teacher just wheels out a TV. I think this movie should be played. Yeah, honestly. But yeah. So yeah, please share your thoughts about the movie or share your thoughts about anything.
Yeah.
And yeah, thanks for watching.
Please comment down below.
Oh yes, that's what it was.
And share your thoughts and our thoughts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Until next time though.
Bye.
See ya. Thanks for watching. It's a wrap.
You see, I keep thinking that what we need is a new language. A language of the heart. Languages in the Polish forest where language wasn't needed. Some kind of language between people that is a new kind of poetry. That's the poetry of the dancing bee that tells us where the honey is. And I think that in order to create that language, you're going to have to learn how you can go through a looking glass into another kind of perception where you have that sense of being united to all things, and suddenly you understand everything.